Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a stack of sources, dive deep, and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge just for you.
Think of us as your guides, through the information overload. We try to help you connect some, sometimes pretty fascinating, sometimes bizarre dots.
And today, that journey takes us into the intricate world of structural anthropology and myth,
That's right. And we're guided by one of the real giants in the field, Claude Lévi-Strauss. We're working from excerpts related to his book, Myth and Meaning.
which actually came from talks he gave, right? Not originally a dense academic text.
Exactly, a series of talks, which kind of makes it interesting in itself.
So our mission in this deep dive, well, we want to unpack some of Levi Strauss's core ideas. You know, how he sees the human mind working, how myths get built.
And how he finds these underlying patterns, connections between things that honestly seem utterly unrelated on the surface.
And we're going to do that by focusing on one specific, really puzzling observation.
A historical account from late 16th century Peru, a Spanish missionary there, Father Arriaga, he noted something very strange.
Okay, what was it?
In times of severe cold, really bitter cold, people who were born feet first, or who had a hair lip, or who were twins,
Yeah.
they were accused of causing the cold.
Causing it? How?
Get this, the accusation was they caused it by eating salt and peppers, and they were actually forced to repent for it.
Wow. Okay, just hold on. Being born feet first, having a hair lip, being a twin,
Yeah.
and somehow these completely distinct things are linked together and linked to causing cold weather by eating salt and peppers.
It feels totally random, doesn't it?
Completely. How on earth could Levi Strauss find any kind of rational connection there? It just seems baffling.
It does, and that's exactly the kind of puzzle that structural anthropology, his field, really loves to tackle. But maybe before we jump back to Peru, we should talk a bit about the man himself, Claude Lévi-Strauss.
Good idea. He was a huge figure, wasn't he?
Right.
French anthropologist, born way back in 1908, lived a long, long life, very influential.
Absolutely. Spent much of his career at places like the Collège de France, and he's really seen as the founder of structural anthropology.
So what's the core idea behind that structural anthropology?
Well, Levi-Strauss argued that the human mind isn't just, soaking up information passively. It actively structures the world it perceives.
How?
Fundamentally, he said, by creating binary oppositions, pairs of opposites, hot, cold, dark, light, culture, nature.
Male, female, raw cooked, those kinds of things.
Exactly, those kinds of things. Our brains instinctively sort the world into these pairs.
And he thought this wasn't just cultural learning.
No, he suggested it was deeper, maybe even tied to the physical structure of our brain. Two hemispheres, the bilateral symmetry of our bodies were kind of built on dualities.
So we process the world by dividing things up, like our minds are digital machines, he called it.
That's the phrase he used,
Yeah.
Constantly dividing and subdividing, categorizing things into these opposing pairs.
Okay, so where does something like myth fit in? Myths seem so imaginative, sprawling, not rigid and binary.
Well, for Levi-Strauss, myths are basically the human imagination grappling with the big contradictions, the tensions in the world.
Like life and death, good and evil.
Precisely. Those deep dualisms we can't easily resolve, myths try to mediate these tensions, find some kind of resolution, but often in trying to solve one problem, they just create new tensions, new dualisms.
Huh. Like trying to smooth over one crack in the pavement, but you end up making another one right next to it?
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And myths work with what's available. Levi-Strauss saw them as built from fundamental units. He called them mythemes.
Myth seems like the basic Lego bricks of a story.
Kind of, yeah. Basic units of narrative and meaning. He compared them to phones, the basic sounds in a language.
So these mythemes, these core concepts, they get reused and combined in different ways.
Exactly. And the mythmaker, the storyteller. They're not necessarily inventing totally new stuff. Levi-Strauss called them a bricoleur.
A bricoleur. French term.
Yeah, it means like a handyman, a tinkerer, someone who uses the materials they have lying around these mythemes and rearranges them, combines them in clever ways to build a myth that addresses whatever cultural problem or tension is at hand.
The sources also mention this idea of like two Levi Strausses. What's that about?
Yes, that's a common way people talk about him. On one side, you have the Levi-Strauss from his huge work, Mythologics. 4 volumes, incredibly dense, complex analysis.
The one some people felt was too cold, too logical, almost reducing myths to formulas.
Exactly. The cerebral, detached scientist image comes from there.
And the other side.
The other is more the lyrical, maybe subjective, personal observer you get in a book like Tristes Tropiques, which is more like a philosophical travel memoir.
So where does myth and meaning, the book these talks became, fit in?
Well, myth and meaning is interesting because it's often seen as a place where those two sides kind of come together, maybe with more clarity.
And that's partly because it started as spoken talks in
Hmm.
English.
Exactly. English wasn't his first language. He himself said he had to simplify things, that explaining the full, intricate arguments in English was just too difficult.
Huh. So the language barrier actually forced a kind of clarity.
Kind of, yeah. Ironically, it seems to have stripped away some of the denser layers and made his core ideas unusually direct and accessible. You see both the analytical power and maybe a bit more of the human thought process behind it.
It's funny how limitations can sometimes lead to breakthroughs like that.
It really is. But ultimately, whichever Levi-Strauss you're looking at, the goal was the same. He called it the quest for the invariant.
The quest for the invariant, meaning
Yeah.
finding the things that don't change.
Yes. Finding the fundamental structures, the underlying similarities that persist across all the incredible surface diversity of myths and cultures around the world. He wanted to find the universal mental grammar behind them all.
Okay, so that quest brings us back to Peru. How does looking for invariants help us understand why people linked Harelips, twins, and feet-first births to causing cold?
Right. So Father Arriaga's observation, late 16th century, intense cold spells happen.
Mm.
And suddenly people born feet first or with a hair lip or who are twins, they get blamed.
And blamed specifically for eating salt and peppers, which supposedly caused the cold, and then they had to repent. It's so specific.
Very specific. Now, you mentioned earlier the connection between twins and weather. That actually pops up elsewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, the sources mention that it's not completely unheard of in anthropology. Like some groups in British Columbia, indigenous groups, associated twins with controlling weather, bringing good weather, stopping storms.
Right. So the twin weather link itself, while maybe odd to us, isn't the absolute core mystery for Levi-Strauss here.
It's the other stuff, the link between hairlocks and twins, and why those distinct conditions get lumped together with being born feet first. That's the real head scratcher. Why does a split lip put you in the same weird category as being a twin?
This is the central puzzle he zeroes in on. It just doesn't make sense based on biology or local history alone. So, to crack it, he does something typical for him. He doesn't just stay looking at Peru.
He looks wider, North America.
Exactly. He argues that many myths, especially across the Americas, are sort of pan-American. They share deep structural connections, suggesting ancient contact, cultural exchange, shared ways of thinking going way back.
So he's looking for related patterns, maybe pieces of the same puzzle, but scattered across continents.
That's a perfect way to think about it, yeah. And what he finds is this recurring pattern in myths across the Americas.
What kind of pattern?
It often involves a woman, often tricked by a trickster figure.
Yeah.
And this leads to the birth of twins. Or sometimes figures who aren't biologically twins, but are structurally like twins, maybe different fathers, or opposing characters.
Can you give an example?
Sure. There's a Tupinamba myth from Brazil. A woman gets pregnant first by a trickster, then later by God. She has twins, but with different fathers. And they have opposite natures, one seen as good for the Indians, the other bad. So they're twins, but they're also fundamentally divided, untwined in a way.
Twins who are also opposites. That duality again.
Yes, that's key. And you find variations further north. Among the Kootenai, you might get twins born from one event who become cosmic figures, like the sun and the moon. Or the Salish, they have myths with two sisters, different tricksters. They end up having sons who are cousins technically. But the parallel circumstances, the tricky origins, it makes them structurally like twins, figures born from a dual event.
Okay, so this pattern exists. Mythical twins, or twin-like figures, often divided or distinct.
Right.
But where does the hair lip come in? How does that finally connect?
This is the breakthrough moment. It comes from a really crucial, almost startling detail in one specific version of those Salish myths. In this story, the elder sister, after the tricky encounter that leads to her son, she goes to visit her grandmother. And the grandmother sends a hare to meet her on the path.
A hare. Okay.
Yes, the hare. It hides under a log. When the girl steps over the log, the hare makes some kind of inappropriate joke. The girl gets angry, and she hits the hare with her cane.
Oh.
And the myth specifies that when she hits it, she splits its nose and upper lip.
Whoa. The hair lip. The myth itself shows the splitting.
Exactly. Levi-Strauss jumps on this. The myth presents this act, splitting the hare's body, as a symbolic action. It's directly linked, in the myth's logic, to the idea of creating twins.
How so?
The implication seems to be that if the split had gone further down the hare's body, it would have turned one being into two identical ones. So splitting the lip is like an incomplete symbolic version of the very division that results in twins.
Okay, wow. So the hair lip is connected to twin creation through the idea of a symbolic incomplete split.
Precisely. And this really resonates, Levi-Strauss argues, with indigenous beliefs found across the Americas about how twins actually originate.
What kind of beliefs?
The sources mention myths where twins are thought to come from an internal splitting within the mother's womb, like a splitting of body fluids. There's even a belief mentioned about a pregnant woman turning over too quickly in her sleep, causing this internal division.
Right. And a hair lip is a visible physical split on the face.
So it gets interpreted, in this mindset, as an outward sign of that internal potential for division. It's seen as incipient twinhood, a partial, visible mark that reflects this underlying possibility of being split or producing twins.
Okay, that's a strong link. Hair lip as incipient twinhood via splitting. Makes sense within that mythic logic. Now, the final piece. How does being born feet first fit into this whole splitting twin thing?
Right, the feet first birth. Another piece clicks into place Levi-Strauss finds from a Kwakiutl myth from the Pacific Northwest. This myth tells of a hated girl who, significantly, has a hair lip. She gets captured by an ogress, put in a big basket with other kids.
And how does she escape?
To get out, the hair-lipped girl, uses a seashell to split open the bottom of the ogress's basket, and she escapes. The myth specifies feet first.
Feet first, just like in the Peruvian account. There it is.
There's the connection. Levi-Strauss points out this amazing symbolic symmetry. You have the hair-lipped girl escaping feet first from the split basket. This mirrors the position of the hare under the log in that Salish myth.
How so?
The hare, struck and split by the girl, is positioned under the log as if it had been delivered feet first from the girl stepping over it. Both images link the hair-lip state to the feet first position through this idea of splitting or emerging disruptively.
So hair lips, feet first births, and actual twinship. They're all symbolically linked because they represent different kinds of splitting or division or maybe disruptive exit.
That's the core structural connection he identifies. Within this mythic framework, they're perceived as different manifestations of the same underlying concept, splitting or incipient division.
So the hair lip is an anatomical split.
Right.
Being born feet first is like a symbolic split from the normal birth process, a disruptive exit, maybe taking a shortcut out.
Exactly.
And twinship is the ultimate internal division resulting in multiple births.
You've got it. That shared, abstract quality splitting, division, separation links them in the symbolic logic of these myths, even across huge distances in different cultures.
It's like the mind is grouping these things not by biological cause and effect as we see it, but by a shared conceptual quality, the quality of being divided or splitting apart.
Precisely. It's a structural logic, not necessarily a linear causal one. It categorizes things based on these perceived symbolic qualities.
And understanding this connection, the hair lip as incipient twinhood. The sources say this also helps solve another puzzle, something about the hare being a major deity for Algonquian groups.
Yes, exactly. Anthropologists had apparently puzzled over why the hare, of all creatures, would be considered such a central, sometimes even the highest, deity among some Algonquian-speaking peoples. Traditional explanations didn't quite satisfy.
But if the hare is understood structurally,
as representing incipient twins.
because of its split lip.
Right. The split lip is the key marker. Hares are prominent rodents, obviously, but the sources suggest rodents in general, perhaps because of that characteristic split feature, were seen as embodying this concept of partial division, of incipient twinhood. The hare is a prime example.
Okay. And how does this link back to the idea of dangerous or unusual births?
Well, there's often a theme in mythology about competition, even conflict, inside the womb, especially with twins. One twin might try to get out first, sometimes forcefully.
Like taking a shortcut.
Exactly. And a feet-first delivery could be seen as a kind of shortcut, a disruptive way out. In some extreme myths, one twin might even split the mother open to be born first.
So, the feet first birth gets symbolically tied to that disruptive, competitive aspect associated with twins, which might explain why both were sometimes feared or seen as, well, dangerous.
It connects them, yeah. Both represent a kind of deviation from the standard unified birth process. They carry connotations of division, maybe even a forceful breaking away.
Okay. One last thing on the hare, then.
Yep.
If it represents this incipient twinhood, this state of being not quite one, not quite two, how does that explain its character in the myths? It's often ambiguous, right? Sometimes a wise creator, sometimes a foolish trickster or clown.
That ambiguity is perfectly explained by its structural position, according to Levi-Strauss. Think about intermediary figures in mythology beings that connect the human world and the divine world.
Okay.
Sometimes you have single, unified intermediaries, maybe like a messiah figure. Other times you have dualistic intermediaries, like those good and bad heavenly twins we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
representing clear opposites.
Right. So where does the hair fit?
The hair sits right in between those two poles. It's not fully unified like the single figure, but crucially, it's also not yet fully divided into two distinct opposites like the heavenly twins.
Because it's incipient twins. It's
Yeah.
in the process of splitting, but not fully split.
Exactly. It represents that state of partial division. And because it exists in that ambiguous in-between state, both opposite characteristics, the wisdom of the creator and the foolishness or disruptiveness of the trickster, can logically coexist within that single figure. The ambiguity reflects its structural position.
Wow. That ties it all together. The visible split lip symbolizes a deep structural state of being partially divided, which then explains its complex, dual nature in the myths.
It's a really powerful example of how this kind of structural analysis can work, moving from a really strange historical note to uncovering these deep connections about how the mind might organize fundamental concepts like birth, division, unity, duality,
Yeah.
even the nature of divinity.
So quite a journey. We went from this totally bizarre-sounding historical account in Peru, Harelips, twins, feet first births, cold weather, salt and peppers.
Yeah, seemed impossible to connect.
Right. And through Levi-Strauss's method, looking for these Pan-American structural links, we uncovered this underlying pattern, this concept of splitting or incipient division.
A concept that links hair lips, birth positions, and twinship across different cultures.
And even helps explain the complex character of a major mythological figure like the hare. It really demonstrates that quest for the invariant you mentioned.
Finding those fundamental ideas, those relationships that echo through wildly different stories and practices, it suggests a kind of shared human cognitive landscape operating beneath all the surface variations.
It really makes you look at the world differently, doesn't it? Makes you wonder what other seemingly strange connections in myths, or maybe even in how we categorize things today, might make sense if we looked for these underlying structural principles, like binary opposition or mediation, or this idea of symbolic splitting.
What does it tell us about the ways our minds try to create order, even if it's a messy, mythic kind of order, out of the chaos of experience? It suggests our thinking might be more fundamentally patterned, maybe in ways we don't always consciously recognize.
A lot to think about there. A fascinating deep dive.